This is a quick video to showcase how to take animation caches from Houdini, or actually any other software from a 3D application, I guess, in this case Houdini, to Unreal. And this is by using Alembic caches. There are many ways of getting animations into Houdini and Unreal in this case. In the previous video, I showcased how to take character animations from Houdini to Unreal, and those were actual character rigs, right? So those were characters that had their own rig, and then we would take animation clips using the same rig into Unreal. Well, that is one situation, but in visual effects, most of the time, you don't do that, right? You work with actual caches. Those could be, generally speaking, Alembic caches, but they could be also USD caches, right? So I will cover USD in a future video. This is mostly about Alembic animation caches. So in here I have this dummy file, which is very simple, which is this Pixar teapot just walking. And this is not, we don't have a control rig for this. This is just a cache. So if I go inside, as you can see here, this is just an Alembic cache, essentially. So that's what we have, right? So this is what we want to export. What I did here is just, a little bit of cleanup and transforming this into the into the Unreal, into the Houdini scale, right? Because this one actually comes from Maya. So I just transformed this to 0.1, so it is actually in meters. So ideally you can export it from here, right? But in this case, I want to export materials as well. And by materials, I don't mean the actual materials themselves, because that doesn't really make sense, right? Because maybe this was created with RenderMan or Arnold or Karma, and all of those have their own material system, obviously. So I will be recreating the materials in Unreal. But what I want to do is to create groups for all the different materials. So this is just a packed Alembic. So I'm unpacking this here so I can have access to the geometry. And I'm creating a group for the actual kettle itself, which is going to have a material, another group for the feet, which would have a different material, and another group for the knob, which is this thing here, right? Okay, so that's it. And then you can just create a material node to add a material to each of those groups. And here I have a material network where I'm basically using principal shaders with just a simple color, just to have a visual representation of what we want to do, right? Cool. So the way to export these, once you have your groups and everything that you want to export, is just by using a raw Alembic. I haven't tried to export it from here, file, export, that you can export an Alembic from here. I rarely use that when I'm exporting from Houdini. So I'm usually use a raw Alembic. And the only thing that you need to know about this raw Alembic is that you should set the format to Ogawa. If you try with the other formats, it wouldn't work. Unreal would complain about it. So it is better to export it as Ogawa. Okay, at least that's basically that's how I get it to work, essentially, in Unreal. All right, that's pretty much it. And obviously, you need to export the range that you want to export, basically. And my animation is 100 frames at 24 frames per second. So this is what I'm exporting, and this is just an Alembic file. All right, good. Then while I'm here, I will cover. I thought it would be a good idea to cover as well how to export a camera. So generally speaking, I use cameras either as USD or FBX. I don't tend to work with Alembic cameras in Unreal. Not sure why. Maybe because I just got used to work with FBX cameras. Anyway, here I have a camera. So if I take a look at that camera, this is the camera, right? So if you try to export this camera as either FBX or Alembic, it might or might not work. It depends. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I guess it depends on how this camera has been animated. In this case, I only have a couple of keyframes, one at the beginning here and one at the end. So if I export this as FBX, it is probably going to work. But if I export it as an Alembic, I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. So what you have to do is to do what I've done here, which is bake all those keyframes. So as you can see, we get a keyframe, a key every frame, right? So if you don't know how to do that, it's fairly simple. So basically you need to create a camera, and what you need to do to this camera is essentially just make sure that you're using the same settings, like the resolution and the focal length and the aperture. I don't think the clipping is important here, but yeah, resolution, focal length and aperture, it is important. So well, this is the default camera, so it has actually the same settings that I'm using here. Now you need to go inside of the camera, and here you need to create a chop network, right? And inside of this chop network, you need to go inside and you need to create a object constraint, and this one needs to point to the original camera, right? So here in target, I'm going to select my render camera. Okay. And now I need to create an export node and just connect it here and make sure that you enable both the display and the export option here. Cool. Now, if you go all the way up and go to the camera, now if you scroll, if you go to the transform tab and enable constraints, now here you can select the constraint network that we just created, and that would be this one, right? And now you can right click here and bake constraint. And as you can see, it has baked animation here. So if we check camera 1, you can see that it's essentially the same, but now we have all those keys here. All right, good. So now you can just export these either as export selection, as Alembic, or FBX. And again, I tend to work with FBX when it comes to cameras in Unreal or Unity. So yeah, just export that FBX, make sure you're selecting the camera here and exporting the camera somewhere. All right, cool. So now let's jump into Unreal. So now here in Unreal, I'm just gonna create a dummy folder that I'm gonna call dummy for now. I think I'm using here the cinematic viewport. So let me jump out of that for a second. Okay. Now if I go to my dummy folder, we can basically import what we have here. So I'm gonna export my teapot animated APC. That's the Alembic we exported from Unreal. And once we do that, we get this Alembic cache import options. So here you have a couple of different options. So if you set this one to geometry cache, okay, then we need to disable these flattened tracks, otherwise the material groups are not going to work. Not really sure why, but this is essentially how I made it to work. The frame start and frame end is 0 and 100, that is correct. And there is something else that we need to change, which is the scale, right? And the scale, to convert this from Houdini scale to Unity to Unreal scale, we need to multiply by 100. So if we do that and import this Alembic cache, hopefully it should work. All right, here we have it. So if I drag and drop this somewhere and reset the position, let me jump into it. Okay, that is working. Cool. But if we press play now, we can see that it's actually working. All right. Something that we forgot to do, or I forgot to do, it was to import the materials as well. because as you can see, this didn't bring the materials. So let me do it again. Okay, so the materials are recognized up there. Flatten tracks is disabled. All right, let me see where we missed the materials. Yeah, create materials, right? So if we do that now we should get the materials. There you go. And now we get the materials, right? So we can easily, replace the create our own materials here in Unreal and just replace them. Okay, and as you can see, if I press play, this works. But this doesn't work in Sequencer, which is what we want to use for visual effects, right? In visual effects, we don't care about the play mode. So let me get rid of all of these and get rid of all of these. Because what we need to do is essentially the same, but instead of importing it as geometry cache, we want this as skeletal. And the other settings should be the same. So we should have create materials enable, and the scale is the same, import. Okay, and now it's generating all the components for that skeletal mesh. There you go. So we have the teapot animated, the teapot animated sequence, and the skeleton. So this one is the skeleton mesh. So this is the one that we actually care about. So I'm going to drag and drop that one in the viewport. And here we have it. All right, good. And if I press play now it doesn't work, but that's fine because we want to use it in the actual sequencer. I'm going to replace those materials with, just like a dummy gray material, essentially. Okay, so now it looks a little bit better. Obviously, you can replace the materials with the proper materials, but I just don't have any materials now. Right, so I'm gonna go back to my dummy folder, and from here, I'm going to create a sequence. So add label sequence, and I'm gonna do it over here, and I'm gonna call it teapot sequence or whatever. Okay, good. And now I can just take my teapot over here, and in the animation, now I should have my animation. So now this is working in the same way that I have in Houdini. Well, actually not really, because I need to set my timeline to 24 frames per second, and now this should be working just fine, right? Okay, great. Let me add, perhaps we need some kind of plane in here. All right. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, and I think we need to move it a little bit. I'm gonna also assign my gray material. And now I guess we need to move this plane a little bit. Okay, cool. What about the camera that we exported as FBX? Well, there are multiple ways of doing that. The one that I like to use is essentially, I like to create a cinematic camera actor, right? I can drag and drop this one over my sequencer. And now from here, I can basically import, and I'm going to import that camera that we exported from Houdini, which is this. All right. And when we import the camera here, we need to make sure of a couple of things. Match by name only. This one needs to be disabled. Import uniform scale. Let's fix the scale by multiplying by 100, and disable create cameras because we already created the camera. Click on import, and there you go. Now we have exactly the same camera that we had in Houdini. Let me move this to the first frame. There you go. And this is the same camera that we had in Houdini, right? I guess the focus is wrong because that's something we control here in Unreal. So with the camera selected, you can essentially just filter by focus and maybe set this one to tracking. And now we can select the teapot, for example, or obviously you can just do manual and control this manually, right? But yeah, in my case, I think tracking and selecting the teapot is probably just fine. And now this should be in focus and this should be working. Well, I see that actually the floor should be a little bit down. All right, something like that. And yeah, that's essentially how you import Alembic caches to Unreal. All right.